Yo, I'm trying to figure out how to do this. There we go. Hold on. There, that's the one. How is everybody doing today? We are going to get right into this thing. I screwed up the launch for this live stream. I accidentally pressed go like 30 minutes, like an hour before it was supposed to even happen. So let's wait for everybody to kind of jump in here real quick. But how are you guys doing? Happy Friday. Markets took a little bit of a dip on some of the unemployment news, but you know, that's just part of it. When you cut your hair yesterday, how you guys doing? Let's get everybody rolling in here real quick. Hold on. Let me share this real quick on Twitter. Let's see here. Okay, posted. Let's get back over here. How you guys doing? Hey, who does your music? For which intro? Because my buddy Dallin made the music in my first intro, like the 10-second intro at the beginning of my videos, but I think it was some Dutch guy that made honestly, the music he didn't make. He made the video, so I don't know who the music is. I'm sure it's just from some random website that allows you to download music. I don't remember which one, but Dallin made the song in the original intro that I have. So let's see, how long since it's been that short? Pre-2016? No, honestly, when I first moved back to Utah from California, I ended up just getting a haircut then, and I think it was actually shorter than this, but it was pretty close. You know, it's been 3 years probably. So fresh and so clean. Thank you. Is this from 2 years back, or did you just cut your hair? I just cut it. No, this isn't live. This is an old recording of me when I was living in California. Are we going to revisit the 108 to 105K range? Honestly, it's possible. We're going to jump into these markets, make sure everybody's rolling in here real good. We're going to jump in, look at some of the price action on Bitcoin, Ethereum, kind of go over that. And then if you guys have some picks that you want to cover, we'll go over those after. So let's start by taking a peek. This is a chart of Trump's coin. I do believe that we're really close to a bottom. I think we could see one more low right here before, but I think that is the bottom. 5 waves down, 3, 4, 5. So I think that that's what's coming here shortly. If it even makes a lower low, it might not. It might just hold because there's 5 waves down here. But I wouldn't be surprised if all this Justin Sun FUD ends up being the bottom for Trump coin. So, you know, I don't think you could really go wrong buying into a coin that the sitting president, you know, created himself in the institutional cycle either. Even though it's worth like $6 billion in market cap, I mean, geez, it's the president's coin. I think even some exposure is probably worthwhile, but who knows? So let's go right in here. So we got rejected. All of this is because of the normal markets. If we jump into the SPX real quick, this is really the reason why everything's going down. The S&P 500 got smoked. Let's remove these real quick. Jump into the 4-hour. The S&P 500 got smoked up here. Big bearish engulfing candle. But honestly, the issue with a lot of these news events that come out around the unemployment rates is usually it's like a short-term FUD where you see that big downswing, but oftentimes they just end up reversing and going back up. So I'm not really going to be too worried about this. A lot of times that's just initial fear that takes place. So, you know, seeing Bitcoin kind of dragging a little bit right here, I don't think it's that big of a deal. You know, overall, this is rejecting. It's probably going to see one more low, probably going to come back down to at least 109.5. But regardless, guys, all we're in right now is just chopped. That's all this is. I don't think it changes anything in the shorter time frames. I view this either we're bottomed right here or we've got basically one more low like that before it bottoms. But I don't think that, you know, regardless of which route it takes, it's not really going to be that big of a move either or. You know, if we come and look at ETH, it's looking a lot more weak right now. Let's go through here. So in my last update on Ethereum, I was talking about this descending triangle, right? And that's kind of been the thing that we're watching for in here. And we're still watching for the same thing. And the only thing that's changed, well, nothing's changed. We've just actually reacted off of this support level even more times. But now that we're getting this big bearish engulfing candle, we obviously rejected at the range highs. I think it's very likely that ETH is about to spill down. And it's going to come all the way back down to probably 3,800. Just back down to this high, somewhere inside of this cluster. That's what I'm looking for with ETH. And really a lot of that just comes from the Fibonacci targets. If we just go from the low to the high, you know, you're basically looking at this 1618 as your primary target for the descending triangle, which is $3,830, or just right down here on this next high. That's what I think is going to happen for ETH. For sure, ETH looks the worst right now currently. So we're probably going to end up seeing Bitcoin dominance bouncing in the short term. But once again, guys, you know, if ETH is going to make a lower low, Bitcoin probably, well, Bitcoin doesn't have to make a lower low. We could see Bitcoin just kind of stagnate and go back down to support. And during that period, ETH would sell off. So, you know, I don't think it really matters one way or another, whether Bitcoin makes one more lower low or whether ETH makes one more lower low. Doesn't really change anything. So that's what we're looking for moving forward. So I just don't think we should be too shaken out necessarily, even though I am anticipating further downside. But, you know, I told you guys that at the beginning of the week that we should expect downside in ETH, one more lower low. Potentially that happens with Bitcoin as well, but we're just going to have to watch. Let's go in here, see some of these comments. Let's see. I feel like both Trump's projects was pump and dumps. I mean, any launch of a project is pretty much a pump and dump because they almost all do the same thing. Every single one of them will have that listing pump. They'll pretty much fully retrace the listing pump. Some of them will actually make a new all-time low from that listing pump. But that's just the way it goes because there's too many speculators in the pre-sales. If you're going to run a pre-sale, you're going to have people get in early. Some of those people are going to have tokens unlocked at the beginning. Why wouldn't you take profit if you're up 10x on the launch? That's just the way every launch goes. So it doesn't matter whether it's Trump's project or whether it's Elon Musk's project or whoever. If you're running a token sale, you're guaranteed to have that same pump and dump formula. That's just the way it goes. So I don't think it's a pump and dump. I mean, they're accumulating tons of different altcoins. So they're going to be a big financial institution if you think that crypto is going to get adopted. So, you know, it's definitely going to pump again. I have like nothing but confidence that says we're going to see that thing just absolutely start ripping. You can't be bearish on the president's crypto in the institutional crypto cycle. I mean, my God. Let's go. The bull market haircut is here. Time to pump. Amen. Good to see you, Vibra. Ooh. What's your outlook on Doge? We'll jump into these here very soon. Good to go. Good to have you, brother. Thanks for the support. Thanks for accepting friend request. Look at the chart I tried to share with you. There's already another well-known YouTuber that picks it up, House of Crypto. Check it out. I'm assuming on Discord. What's it called? I don't want to watch the video. Is it ETH? That's what the profile picture is. What's the ticker? I'll look it up, but I don't want to go through and watch the whole thing. Howdy. Good to have you. Yo, Cliff. It's good to have you in here, my friend. I'll do a deep dive in Metis for sure. I got another one wanting Metis too. Oh, scroll up. Okay. Wait, what coin is it? I'm still confused. I don't know what you're talking about. Good to go. Are you talking about ETH? Oh. Ethereum. So you want let's look at it real quick. We're already on the ETH chart. So basically what you're saying is that this whole thing is kind of a Wyckoff. I mean, realistically, it kind of is. I mean, that's why all these altcoins are actually creating Wyckoffs, is because they're following Ethereum. So I mean, realistically, it kind of is, but it's kind of not. I mean, it does have a lot of the same resemblances. But if it was a real Wyckoff, generally what you're going to see is something like this. You're going to see a low. It's going to come back up into resistance. It's going to reject. It's going to make kind of like this midway higher high. It's going to bounce back into resistance again. It's going to reject again. And then it's going to come all the way back down to this primary low before it does the Wyckoff accumulation. This is an actual Wyckoff, but there's a couple different forms of a Wyckoff. There's a Wyckoff schematic 1, which is the one I just showed you. There's a Wyckoff schematic 2, where it's more like this. You have the low. Well, let me just pull it up here. Hold on. I'll teach you guys about Wyckoff, because these Wyckoffs are really, really valuable in my opinion. So there's like 3 different forms of them. Let's remove these drawing tools real quick. Let's paste this. So this is more or less like the basic version of a Wyckoff. This is what I'm talking about, where you have the low, resistance, and then you have the final spring. Now, sometimes these are going to hold support. Sometimes the spring is going to make a lower low. But then, you know, there's also other forms like a schematic 2. If we pull up the other version, the spring doesn't actually make a lower low, right? So if we come, let's make this smaller, pull that over here. Now, this is a schematic number 2, right? So both of them look pretty much the same, but notice how the spring holds like kind of support in the mid-range, whereas this one makes a lower low. These are kind of 2 different variations of the same thing. But there's other different forms of it as well. You know, you could technically call this a kind of like a Wyckoff, because it does look pretty similar to this realistically. Let's go in here. Hold on. If we kind of hide this real quick, you guys can kind of get the picture. So this yeah, okay. I'm seeing it a lot more. I kind of said it wasn't a Wyckoff, but no, this is definitely a Wyckoff. You can see it perfectly inside of the ETH chart, actually, when you overlay it, where you got the resistance, that's right here. You make that secondary, the ST phase B right here, rallies back up into resistance, and then you get the spring, right? So we just finished that spring-loaded bounce. That was right here. And now if you guys notice, right on the edge, when it rallies all the way back up into resistance, that's where we're at right now. So that's actually a really good eye. Shout out to Good to Go. That's a really awesome chart that I didn't even realize, actually. It's funny because I've been seeing all of the Wyckoffs happening across the board in these altcoins, but I didn't actually see it in the Ethereum chart for some reason. You could also look at the Bitcoin cycle in the last bull market, and it would technically be the same pattern as well. So it's pretty awesome. Let's see. Haircut looking clean. Dude, you've got a beard and long hair. If you shaved your beard completely off and cut your hair short, I don't even think I'd recognize you. I don't even know if I've ever seen you without a beard, truthfully. Yeah. Okay, I'm looking at that chart you sent me in the Telegram. Good to go. It does look exactly the same. I just wasn't able to like visualize it for some reason. It's because that secondary or the spring in Ethereum was so gnarly. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. But man, that really is a perfect Wyckoff. I think I'm going to make a video about it. Then it'll be pretty fun. Let's see. Okay, let's jump into some of these altcoins. Everybody who has altcoins you want covered, drop them below. I'm going to start with Metis, because I've heard more people tell me to cover this one so far. So we're going to jump into Metis first. Let's pull it up over here. I mean, Metis was a good example of another, well, we'll just leave the same analysis here. So Metis has always been one of my favorite ones. I really believe in the layer 2 narrative for this cycle. I think it's going to take off once we finally see ETH go into new all-time highs. We're just kind of waiting for that period. You know, Metis has really lagged over the last year, even though it had such a good outperformance when we were talking, you know, 2023, beginning of 2024. And so it's kind of dragged. It came all the way back down, which, whatever. That's just part of the altcoin game, unfortunately. It would have been nice to see it hold. But regardless, you know, this thing is ultimately completing this ABC correction. You know, I don't think it's going to fully retrace this move, because all this was it's our first impulse of the new cycle, right? You can see the impulse here, 1, 2, 3, 4, with the final blow off top wave 5. So that would have been our first. Oops. What the heck? Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that would have been our first cycle over here. And then what follows, ABC correction, pretty much fully retraced the move all the way back down to here. And then we broke out of that bottom and started a brand new impulse. So this is our first impulse of the new cycle. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, right? 5 waves up, similar to this. Wave 5 wasn't a blow off top, but we're earlier into the cycle. Generally, it's not going to do that. Then we see the A, B, C back down. So all we're really doing, you know, if you can visualize it, this is just kind of, this is just kind of an echo fractal of the bigger one. And that's really all that's playing out. You know, what's going to happen is we're going to have a wave 3 impulse. So based off of our fib targets, if we go from the low to the high back down to this low, assuming that this is where we bottom, you know, our base target for wave 1 is the 1618. So this is where we're going inside of the next impulse. We're going pretty much back up to these all-time highs at about $239. But honestly, inside of a wave 3 impulse, oftentimes they double the size of the 1618. So the 1618 means that if we hit this price target up here, wave 3 is exactly the same size as this first impulse. But wave 3s are often way bigger than the first impulse. This is just the first little one that starts the hype. Wave 3 is the biggest, the most volume comes in, it's the most parabolic and all of that stuff. So generally, you're going to see wave 3 actually come all the way up here and tag the 2618, meaning that it's double the size of the first impulse. So if we see the same thing play out over in here, you know, just inside of this next run, we're going to see this thing go up like 26x approximately. And so what I would imagine, probably be one big quick impulse, pull back down, and then that would lead us into our final kind of blow off top. It would be this move after. So what we're getting ready for is right here. This is this. And this is right here. And then wave 5 will be like that, right? So who knows what it hits? I think it could hit $1,000 though. I've really kind of stuck with that belief. So we're going to kind of watch and see. But I really like Metis. It's one of the better risk to reward ratios in the market right now. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. Do you think PulseChain can 100x from PulseChain? I don't really know what you mean by that, but do I think PulseChain can 100x? I do think it can 100x. Let's jump in and take a look at it real quick. Let me pull the address real quickly. WPLS. Why am I getting notified of all these messages on Discord? I normally don't. Okay, if we look at Pulse, one thing about Pulse that I noticed today, let's go to a monthly. So this is our biggest time frame that we have. And if we look at the RSI, we've actually just been uptrending throughout this entire time. So having monthly bullish divergence is a really good sign for the long term of Pulse, because we've seen lower lows and lower highs throughout this, right? Lower lows, lower highs. And that's been the case up to this point. But the fact that the monthly RSI has continued to trend up as we're going lower, this is bullish divergence. It's exactly what you want to see. You know, we can come down to a weekly and we probably end up seeing the same type of stuff. Yeah, even on the weekly, you see pretty much the same thing. Higher highs, higher lows. The RSI is always trending up, even going since pretty much here we've been trending up. So no matter what way you look at it, Pulse has massive amounts of bullish divergence, which tells me that the trend is really close to ending with this bearish kind of consolidation. But, you know, like what's going to happen when this thing bottoms, whether it comes back down to retest this low one more time, or whether we just kind of reverse right here, it doesn't really change anything. What's going to happen when Pulse starts to break out, it's just going to run straight up like this to these all-time highs, maybe even make a new all-time high. It's going to pull back, probably just come back down to this lower high that we were at 0.00016. And then from there, you're just going to see that reverse, and it's going to finally start running into new all-time highs. How high that is and how high it goes, I really don't know. But, you know, the market cap of Pulse is like $300-something million. That's not very much. I bought a few different layer ones in the last cycle, valued somewhere around there. And, you know, those went up 50 to 100x. So I do think it's possible. We're going to see. Do you think Richard Hart's plan is just to rotate the SAC money to pump the chain, or has he got some tricks up his sleeve? Seems too simple of a plan. What do you think his plans are? I mean, honestly, I think that the main thing that he should do is dump some of that money into the liquidity pools. He already has. I mean, if you were watching the lower high that we made, where this kind of green line is, it was at the peak of that he started to actually I think it was swapping Pulse for PulseX, or he was putting something, he was doing something with the liquidity pools, but he was pumping it up. Like he was doing that. And he was doing that right as it looked like the market was starting to finally go back up again. So I think that he FOMO'd in a little bit too early, in the same ways that he FOMO'd in buying into Ethereum at like $4,500. You know, he made the mistake there. But I think that him actually putting all that money into PulseX at the very top of that lower high move, it was showing what his plans were, what his intentions were. Like, he is going to do that. He's got enough money. He's going to for sure do that. And it doesn't really even need that much. He definitely doesn't have to put the whole PulseChain sacrifice into it or anything like that. So I think he's going to. It's just a matter of he's so far FOMO'd 2 different times at the local top. And even though, you know, whatever, I'm not even trying to fault the guy for it. Everybody makes mistakes. But him doing that, in my opinion, was him ultimately doing the thing that we've all talked about and speculated on, of him pumping the money into the liquidity pools and stuff. So, I mean, for sure, I think that's what he's doing. I mean, he's already done it 2 different times. So I just think that that's what he's going to use all that ETH for, right? Maybe not all of it. He doesn't need to use all of it. But, geez, just a small amount is enough to drive up the values of these things tremendously. And the fun thing is, he can start the hype, right? He can put a little bit in here, the market pumps. And if the market conditions are right, that's just going to bring in new buyers. So it just takes even more of a load off of his shoulders for having to just keep pumping more money into the liquidity pool. I've seen a few people asking about Doge. Let's go take a peek. I just looked at Doge today. It looks really good. Oop, wrong chart. Oop. Take a peek. So if we come and take a look at Doge, I mean, really, when I look at Doge, it just reminds me of like Bitcoin in 2017 or 2016, really. Like, if we do this, oh, hold on. If we do this, and we grab Bitcoin from that 2017 cycle, come all the way down to here. In my opinion, it really just kind of looks the same. I mean, you get this long double bottom formation. Once it starts to uptrend, you're kind of seeing that. And so I think what happens next is it breaks up. We probably come like this. And then that sets us in for the blow off top, right? Or it could just, you know, pretty much start rocketing. The thing with altcoins, guys, is they'll build these trends and they'll be in like the very bottom of their trends. And it might look like they're just going to do something like this, a real steady kind of gradual impulse, because that's what they've been doing. But when the real hype comes in, they usually just go straight up in the air. So, you know, I'm not really anticipating once the market really flips. I honestly think Doge could just start sending it immediately into a new all-time high. Maybe we don't even have much of a pullback, if anything. Maybe it's just one weekly candle that retests this before it gets completely bought back up. That's generally what's going to happen with the altcoins. So I think Doge is in the exact same situation. I mean, Doge is for sure just one of the better memes that you can play, even though it's got a higher market cap today. It's just one of the safer picks, but, you know, I think it's going to go back up for sure. Let's see. Metis only 96 mil market cap. Seems a little risky. I mean, yeah, high risk, high reward. The point of maximum financial risk is the highest point of financial return at the same time. So it's all perspective. Most people don't want to buy at the bottom when something's crashed, because in their head, it looks like it's going to crash and go even lower. However, that's also the best time that you can buy it from, when you're looking in hindsight and see the whole cycle start back over. So that's just part of the way it goes. Do you think BTC is going to go down to around 103? I mean, I'd say closer to like 106, but 103 is possible. I mean, apples to oranges. I think that's the way the saying goes. It's all relatively the same. What I think is we're either going to see Bitcoin bottom from right now, or we'll have one more lower low. And, you know, I don't think it's going lower than 103 personally. But somewhere right around that range is accurate. Good to see you, brother. Thank you for the support. Did you ever drop the how to buy Pulse video? I have not. That'll be next week. I'll make one. I'm starting to get back in my schedule of uploading 5 times per week. So I'm going to have a lot more opportunities to pump out different times of, or different forms of content. But that's one of the most common questions that people get, is how to buy it. So I'll walk you guys through that very soon. I think him buying ETH was more related to the SEC case. I mean, I don't. He literally bought the local high when ETH broke out and it looked like it was going to start sending. I mean, he for sure was buying it to speculate. I mean, he was buying it because he thought ETH was going to run into new all-time highs. I mean, that was pretty obvious to tell. Has nothing to do with the SEC case. Dude's got plenty of money. Plus spending the money that he raised for the SEC case, or not, I mean, not the SEC case, but spending the money seems on more crypto almost just seems counterintuitive if the SEC's after you for money laundering and stuff. Link, if not all recovered. And what's your combat level in RuneScape? I can't remember. On my original RuneScape account, this isn't OSRS. This was the original. Like, I mean, I first started playing in 2007. So it was right after they made the update from the OG, and they had like, I mean, technically it still looks like OSRS, but it had kind of upgraded from the original old school. And then that was when I first started playing. And I played that till probably 2012. And I think that character was up to like 83. But then I started playing like 4 years ago. I started playing OSRS, and I believe that character got up to like 90 or something. He had full bandos. I know that. So, I mean, he was high enough. Can we look at the Algorand chart? I got some Algorand. Just been holding it. Me and my dad actually have this. I don't even remember why. It's been in my account on Coinbase for like 6 years, if not more. So Algorand, I mean, realistically, almost all altcoins look about like this to an extent. I mean, they're just kind of inside of this pattern. Some of them have retraced a little bit lower. Some of them haven't. But I mean, it's all the same thing. You know, all altcoins are going to do the exact same thing until ETH starts to break out of all-time highs. When that happens, all of the confidence comes back in, people start bridging, and then that's where you see all of the other ones pick up. So like coins like this, you know, that have made 2 successful higher highs out of this low, higher high, you know, these are going to be the ones that ends up just kind of pumping really high up into these range highs like this, quick pullback, and then they just start going like that. That's the way that these things end up just developing. So it's real slow. It doesn't seem like it's going to happen. Then the second ETH runs, that's when all of the liquidity kind of comes into these things. But this is a good project. I do think it's going to do really well long term. Let's go back and take a peek. Any idea which one will be the real world asset for tokenization? We know one is XRP, but the other one, I mean, ETH? I don't know. Honestly, ETH is better positioned than XRP ever will be. There's way more on ETH than XRP. But no, XRP, I'm not saying XRP is not good either, because XRP's kind of built the infrastructure for institutional grade banking and stuff like that, cross-border payments. So realistically, when it comes to that, you know, XRP's got its own niche and it's going to be the front runner for all of that. But if we're talking about just tokenization of everything else, I mean, honestly, I think that there's going to be way more DeFi in Ethereum, and that's going to trickle down across the board. There's more AI, there's more DeFi. XRP is really just kind of like a one-trick. I don't even want to say a one-trick pony, because I don't believe that's the case. They're going to have their own. They have their own layer. We have the XRP ledger. You can trade altcoins. You can create smart contracts. You could do a lot of the same things, but to be honest, I just think that ETH is just so much further ahead of XRP that's going to continue to be where all of the money consolidates. So XRP is going to be right there with it, though. It's by far one of the most institutionally adopted coins. There's only like a handful of them that have. But I think a dark horse that many people are kind of overlooking is actually Sui. I think that one's going to do really, really well. Most people have kind of overlooked it up to this point. Yo, shout out for the donation. I appreciate that. Thanks, Don. You are the Don. Spot on analysis. Been watching since 2017. I'm swing trading SBR. If you want to look, I have a decent bag in play. SBR. I don't even know what this is. Saber? Is this it? Good Lord. If this thing goes back up to its all-time high, that would be, geez. Holy crap. These are those fun type of speculative plays where it's like throw $100 or throw 500 or $1,000 into it and see what happens, because it's 119x or 119,000%. So what is that? Like 1,019x? I don't know. I'm not good at math, but that's a big number. If it goes back up to that, that would be awesome. Honestly, those are some of my favorite charts to trade. when you see the prior all-time high and that big crash, it at least gives you a reference point for what the value could be, because it was valued at that at one time. So, you know, you see all that hype kind of come back into the market. These things can easily just go back up to some of these crazy highs. And I don't know if that's going to happen. I literally don't know anything about this. But for swing trading in these lows, yeah, for sure. I mean, if this thing just runs to this short-term range high, that's still a really, really great gain. From right now to here, you know, that's still a 12x, right? So it doesn't even need to do anything. It could only just come back up to this high at 14 cents, and you're already going to be at like probably 30x or 40x or something. So I do like to speculate on those type of plays just because there's a prior all-time high, there's price history, and with it just holding support and consolidating for the last like 2.5 years, I think it's definitely gonna at least rally and break that lower high in the bottom. Question is, how high does it rally at the peak? Because I don't know. It's time for the bulls to come out. Amen. I'm ready. This definitely been the most, I don't know, like there's a lot of talk about this being the worst cycle ever. And I guess technically at this point it would be, because we're so much later and we haven't had like a true alt season yet. But we've seen a few mini bubbles throughout. I mean, if you were early to this cycle, there was Aerodrome, there was Metis, the layer 2 narrative blew up. There was the CosmWasm with Cosmos chain. You had all these CosmWasm smart contract tokens that were part of these airdrops and stuff that were happening, and that was something that kind of blew up. Then you had Solana that blew up with the meme coins. You could have got into the meme coins. So honestly, anybody that says that this cycle is terrible or it's the worst one of all time, I think that these people are just ones that were positioned into the wrong places. Because if you were following any of these narratives, you could have made a lot of money. AI agents, that was a great narrative. There's been a number of them that have blown up. So, you know, maybe it isn't as great as, or maybe it's not as easy as prior cycles, but to be honest, this cycle is probably going to stay that way. It's probably going to be consolidated around key narratives and good legitimate projects instead of just, oh, everything goes up together. But at the same time, guys, we really don't know. If we see a ton of new retail exposure, which we haven't seen yet, you know, these things can blow up like crazy, and it'll prove everybody wrong. So we just got to wait and see when ETH breaks out. When ETH really starts to run, that's where all of that altcoin hype is going to happen, or it's just not. Howdy, lights out. Good to have you apart. Betting really big and will be selling along the way up. Good plan. Please, can you take a look at Dent? Sure. Dent. I have heard of this. I don't know what it is. See, this is like one of those XRP type charts. But I mean, here's another thing. So a lot of altcoins that look like this currently that you see, where they've just had these big sell-offs, they're going to do this. Oops. They're going to do this. They're not going to come to their all-time highs. They're just going to make this little lower high pump and dump. So the trick is finding the coins that are going to be going all the way back up again. You know, who knows what ones those are, really. It's all speculative. But these ones that have had this pump from the last cycle and have came back down, we might end up seeing these things kind of come back up and start attacking these prior all-time highs again. It's hard to say, because if XRP did it, you know, a lot of that was institutionally driven. But it's all kind of in the charts, right? I mean, if these are holding higher highs and higher lows and they're not breaking down, chances are they're going to have another run. And I think that this is kind of in the same boat. I mean, realistically, this is a Wyckoff. This is what I was talking about with all these altcoins. Low, range high, mid-range, retest to resistance, and then here's your spring-loaded bounce, right? And then what happens, it breaks up, comes back up to the range high, and then it starts to go back up again. So I think it's likely that we do have another run. But I don't know enough about this project to really be able to confidently say what's going to happen. But based off the chart, I mean, it's holding support. Everything you need to see is pretty much happening. And if it does end up running just up to this prior range high, you're looking at about, 31x or 32, 33x. That's pretty good. So I think it's a possibility. But I don't know. I really don't know. I'm not going to say I do. But if it goes up to its all-time high, there's 16,000% gain. So 160x, that's pretty good. We'll see if it can do that. But you know, the chart is at least holding support, which is what you need to see in these times where altcoins are just getting slaughtered. Great coin, great setup. I don't know what it is. Does anybody know what it is? Solenic. Sure. Is this on Solana? I don't have volume on this chart. Well, we fully retraced this, so it's not an impulse. The only impulse we have is this one right here. So assuming that it's going to hold support, I don't know if it's going to fully retrace this move or what's going to happen, but chances are it's going to come back down to the support if we don't get a bounce soon in ETH, in Bitcoin. But if that's the case, it's probably still going to hold this support. I don't see it just breaking down from this. But this was our first impulse. This is a wave one. This is a wave two. So we're just kind of inside of this consolidation pattern before it starts wave three. So if I had to guess, I do think it's going to come back up and start a new cycle. But I really don't know anything about this to confidently say. It's just based off the chart that it looks like it's ready to kind of start that next impulse because it's at least holding a wave one and wave two breakout. So that's what you want to see. Superverse on the weekly looks like it's on the bottom, and the daily looks like it has a MACD cross and a lot of support on the down. Superverse. Is this a metaverse play? I'm assuming. Yeah, it doesn't look bad. Just a wave one. 1, 2, 3. Hold on a second. What is this? 1, 2. Okay, hold on. I think it's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now this, you better hope this is wave C, because if this is wave A and B, this thing's probably going to retrace fully. I don't know. Like, I have really no idea. It really just rides around Bitcoin and ETH. I mean, if ETH is going to bottom and we're going to start breaking out, this is going to bottom and it's going to start breaking out. This is, a good impulse. Wave one, wave two, wave three probably breaks the all-time highs, retests them like right here. It's new support before it starts that. So that's what you're looking for. This is wave one, wave three comes next. Then you got one more wave five to come inside of like the final blow off top of that. Your opinion, is it too early to speculate a cycle top end of year rather than Q1 of next year? I mean, no. I mean, anybody can speculate on that. It doesn't change the fact that nobody's going to know either way. I mean, it's just a guess. It's literally a crapshoot. And it just gets riskier the more that you're holding on into 2026. So, would I like to see us? I'd like to see us top at the end of the year because that would be better. Then I don't have to question anything, right? Because if we're up and just breaking out and it's the end of the year, I don't think I'm going to hold into 2026. Like, I'm probably just going to sell. And even if I'm not nearly close to where I thought I'd be at the end of my portfolio goals and all that stuff, it's better off selling in the high and having profit than it is just holding it all the way back down and having to repeat this over the course of another 4 and 5 years. It just kind of sucks that way. So, I think you're still better off by, if the market is, if we're in kind of like this slow period and it's looking like it's about to break out, then maybe you would want to hold it. But realistically, if we're already at the point where it's just kind of like into new all-time highs going vertical, I wouldn't be willing to hold into 2026 personally. That's just my opinion. This cycle is harder. Now we have to work 10 times harder to find solid alts for long-term holdings. To an extent, yeah. To an extent, for sure. But, I mean, it was kind of the same way in the last cycle. I mean, if you weren't early to DeFi, if you weren't early to NFTs, if you weren't early to some of that stuff like Dogecoin and whatnot, chances are you didn't really make that much money because, I mean, XRP made a lower high. A lot of those top altcoins didn't really do very much. So it was really Ethereum for me that made my portfolio do so well. So I don't know if it's really that much harder. I mean, I think it's kind of the same as the last cycle because there's been a number of narratives that have blown up, but you kind of have to just, I don't know. From my perspective, it was easy, but I'm trading on all these chains. I'm always researching. I'm always looking on Twitter and stuff. So, for me, my perspective is going to be a little bit different. I can't like project my perspective on how everybody else feels. So I will admit that it has been harder because if you're not that person that's been bridging over and trying to be early to these narratives and even try and chase after some of them after they've blown up, chances are you just missed out on everything because nothing else has even moved. So, yeah, it has been a little harder as far as that goes. But at the same time, that should just give you guys more confidence to try and research and find these narratives early because that's really where the money's at, especially if it's going to keep being harder to find those key altcoins. How unlikely is it that we won't get an alt season at all? I mean, I'd say it's unlikely because Bitcoin dominance is topped and it showed so much bearish divergence. So I'd be surprised if we didn't see an alt season, especially with ETH starting to break all-time highs. I mean, Bitcoin's been in all-time highs. It's followed the same pattern that prior cycles have. You know, it's outperformed, it's led, everything else is lagged and underperformed. And so now that ETH is finally ready to go into new all-time highs, you know, that's when the altcoins actually start running. So I find it likely we have an alt season. It's always a possibility that it doesn't. But, you know, with all of these combination of the president being pro-crypto, launching coins, launching meme coins, the institutions that have been buying, the retail has never showed up. And so I think that that's kind of what's caught everybody off guard. It's like, man, there's no hype. Everything's so dead. Like, is it just going to die out completely? You know, I don't think that's the case. And I think a lot of those opinions are going to shift once retail kind of jumps into the market. But that's what we got to wait for, right? Bro, your hair. I had to cut it off. I was getting sick of it. Honestly, I quit smoking weed, and then it was almost like a light bulb went in my head where I was like, just started doing things, right? I don't know why. I don't know. I just felt like more clear-headed, and the first thing I did was go get a haircut for some reason. So I started getting fat. That was another thing. You can't be fat in the bull market because when you make all your money, you got to be able to flex on the haters. So I was getting fat, had long hair, I was smoking weed. I was just like not really happy with the way I was going. So then I just quit smoking. I threw all of my stuff away in the trash. And then the next day I went and got a haircut. And it was just almost, and then I've been eating super healthy, started working out, things like that. So, you know, all of that kind of at the same time, it's just like I'm trying to move forward into a better light. One of the worst things that you can do is just feel like you're not right where you need to be mentally and physically in a time where you should be at your highest peak performance. And I was kind of getting to that point where I felt like, you know, during this time where the market's not doing a lot, I should be doing as much as I can to, you know, be more healthy and fit and cognitively inclined so that we can kind of ride this out together. So that was just part of the reason why I just felt like I needed a fresh restart. Thoughts on Kaspa? Let's take a peek. I remember a lot of people were really hyped on this one. Oops. Kaspa. Yeah, everybody was super, super hyped on this one when it was running really hard. And it's even held up really great so far, honestly. And this dip, it's good sport. It's probably sitting on the 618. Oop. It's probably sitting on the 618 if I had to guess. Yeah, so it almost tagged the 786 and it kind of bottomed in between the 786 and the 618, but it's currently sitting on the 618. My guess, once again, literally all of these are going to follow the same rule of thumb. As long as ETH is going down, this is going to come back down and retest support again. If ETH goes back up, this is going to reverse and it's going to start going back up again. Once ETH really breaks out, that's when this thing's going to run back up like this and start to go into its next high. But this was just a first little impulse, right? So I think it's got quite a bit more upside potential to come. Kinda. I mean, it's a little higher in market cap at this point, but market cap in and of itself is a flawed metric that you can't always gauge with 100% certainty. And PulseChain is going to prove a lot of people why you should kind of ignore market cap to a certain extent. I mean, you've got people like, what the heck's his name? Ben, into the cryptoverse. I don't remember what his name is. Ben something. But Ben, man, I can't remember what his name is. But Ben, into the cryptoverse, he's always like talking about how market cap is an important metric. But the issue with market cap is the supply and the circulating supply and the amount of supply in the liquidity pools for you to be able to trade. That's ultimately what determines the market cap, because you could have, I mean, Hex is a perfect example. Hex in the last cycle wasn't even listed on any exchanges. You had to go onto a DEX to trade it on Uniswap in the cycle where almost nobody even knew how to use Uniswap. And it went up 10,000x, was number 3 ranked right behind Bitcoin and Ethereum. And it was just because Richard Hart held 90% of the supply. Was Hex really worth $100 billion in market cap? No, but it's just supply and demand. You know, if you have a teeny amount of existing supply in liquidity pools and you get people buying it, the market cap could hit any stupid number and it doesn't matter. There's currently coins on PulseChain where the creators hold like 99% of them. There's only this teeny fraction that you can go buy, and the market caps are worth like multiple billions of dollars. Are they really worth that much? No, there's only like 40K in liquidity to go to be able to trade out of. So liquidity is the thing that matters. Liquidity is way more important than market cap. Anybody who focuses on market cap is kind of an idiot, because if there's not a ton of liquidity and there's not a ton of token supply existing and people come to buy the token, it just balloons like crazy. And so you could see that market cap hit stupid valuations that never should have happened. But it's because market cap is a flawed metric. It's not a true understanding of value. So anybody that tries to tell you to focus on that, my opinion, is missing the point. But to be honest, most people in crypto don't understand liquidity. They don't understand supply and demand. And so when you try and talk about those things, they only focus on market cap because that's all that their brain can wrap their head around. You know, that's one thing about PulseChain people. They are way smarter than everybody else when it comes to understanding liquidity and on-chain trading and things like that, liquidity bonding and all that stuff. Like PulseChain is so much superior than every other community. And I don't even mean that disrespectfully. It's just the way it is. These guys have been on DEXs since 2019, 2018 in the last cycle, way ahead before the Uniswap airdrop even happened in 2020. And they've been launching tokens. They've been bonding liquidity together. Richard Hart taught them how liquidity bonding works, the mathematic relationship it has inside of PulseX. So these guys are way more educated when it comes to understanding that aspect, which is why, you know, they understand that the market caps are almost a flawed metric, whereas nobody else seems to get that. You look way different with short hair, but it feels good. It definitely feels good. I don't have to worry with it in my face all the time. I always had to wear a hat because it'd just be in my face. So now I don't have to wear a hat. But that's also why my forehead's like pale. I'm getting so many messages. Hold on. And my channel is or my notifications are blowing up. Anyways, forgot what I was talking about. Supra. We can take a peek. The issue with this is it hasn't determined support yet. Technically, this is our lowest low. So it rejected up here though. Rejected twice. Now it's coming back down. I think it revisits this support at least, but these are those type of charts that you don't know because it could easily just break down and just kind of keep doing this all the way back down. So I don't like this one nearly as much because it hasn't defined support. We do have a bounce off of this low, but you know, we haven't cemented that low by any means because we rejected 2 different times on resistance. But if it holds this support and then breaks out right here and holds back above this range, that's a double bottom formation, right? And then that would technically be a trend reversal all the way back up to the all-time high. That would be your target. So let's assume that it comes back down and holds support down in here, breaks out. You'd be looking like a 40x move. So, you know, I don't think it's a bad one to be watching for, but you kind of got to watch it confirm that bottom formation. Otherwise, it could kind of keep just bleeding. We are the retail. The next generation of investors you're waiting on doesn't have money to invest. I mean, that's what they said every cycle, but we just kind of see the same thing play out once more. I mean, we are retail investors, but realistically, anybody in crypto right now using this stuff beforehand is a lot more further ahead of the curve. I would say anybody that was in crypto prior to these institutions showing up was in a form of smart money. Obviously, we don't have big money capital, most of us, but we're still further ahead than retail. Retail is just all the random people that are just going to buy when they start hearing everything going up. There's a big difference between that. So, you know, everybody always says retail never has any money, but retail always comes out of the woodwork to pump markets. So this time is different. No, probably not. Some of the best liquidity bonding on PulseChain is PTGC and UFO. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the best project when it comes to understanding all of that stuff with their liquidity webs and stuff that they all have bonded together. I mean, it just sucks all that PTGC off the market. So it's honestly, as long as PulseChain bottoms, PTGC is going to do really, really well. I like that one a lot. Thanks for sharing all the details on the market. What are your thoughts on Polygon? I have not looked at this in a long time. Let's go take a peek. Wait, what was that? Let's see this old analysis. Oh, what happened? Gosh dang it. Polygon. I don't know what's going on with that. Yeah, so we didn't hold support right here. We broke down. So whatever that analysis was failed from that. But if we come to a weekly time frame, honestly, that's why it is kind of a good buy. It's kind of a bargain buy because it got smoked so hard on this downtrend. If there's some bullish divergence, I think it's a good buy, which there is. If we look down here, we have quite a bit of bullish divergence on the weekly time frame, even though we've seen consistent lower lows and lower highs down in here. So I do think that that is the signal that you'd be looking for. But all this really looks like to me is just a big A, B, and a C back down. So that's really what I would be watching for from here is once this thing bottoms. I mean, it's all the same thing. ETH, just watch the ETH chart and watch Bitcoin. When those two break out, these are all just going to follow suit. So, but these ones, when it pumps, it'll probably break back above this high at 70 cents and it'll run all the way back up to the top of this B wave. The question is, will it break out and retest it or will it kind of reject off of it and come back down like this? I don't know. But I think that's the way the trend will initially start. If you look at ETH on the daily, the RSI is going lower and lower, but the price is not dumping hard. So what will happen if ETH will keep going sideways or dump? I mean, ETH is going to dump, I think. ETH's going to make a lower low. You could scroll back to the beginning of this video. I covered ETH. That was like the first thing I covered, really. So if you go back, you can see I think ETH is going to make a lower low. I also talked about that at the beginning of the week. But the point is, as long as ETH does not dump hard, we are fine. And once it finishes the correction, the alts will pump. I mean, yeah. In short, can you please take a look at the Trump chart? I got a buddy that I've been telling. He gave me $500 in Bitcoin to buy like 3 months ago. He bought like the local low before this pump happened. And I told him that I was going to rotate his Bitcoin into this. Where is the, let's just go to Binance. 4 hour time frame. There's a bunch of volume coming in. I know that much. Honestly, I like this setup. I really do. Let's go to 12 hour. I really actually like this setup a lot. If I was going to buy a Trump coin, it would be the meme coin. I wouldn't buy World Liberty Finance. I was just trying to make a speculative play. I think World Liberty Finance is a great, long-term hold just because of what they're going to be doing. It's like an actual legit project. But if I had to just pick one, I'd personally buy the Trump coin because if it just comes back up to this range high, you're going to double your money. And if it goes back up to the all-time highs, which I do think it will, that's like 9.5x. So I think it's a really good play as far as like a safer pick for meme coins and whatnot, because the sitting president's official meme coin is not going to die. It's going to have a pump. It's going to hit new all-time highs. So I think that that's kind of my dark horse is like, why wouldn't you at least have some exposure in a Trump coin? Because it's probably going to pump pretty hard would be my guess. And it's bottoming. I mean, this looks like a big double bottom accumulation. So I think it's a great buy personally. Can you look at Pepe? Sure. It was kind of throwing up an ugly head and shoulder formation at one time. Yeah, it still is. I don't think it's going to hold on to that, but it's not the greatest looking thing in the world. I mean, honestly, all it looks like to me is a wave 1, a wave 3, a wave 4, and we're getting ready for the blow off top of wave 5. And then that's what's going to come next. So we got one more impulse to come before this cycle's over, in my opinion. Aerodrome. This is one of those that if it hit the all-time high, it would be really crazy. Oh, wait. No, this isn't the right one. Aerodrome is like the DEX on base chain, I believe. I like this setup. I think it looks good. Just looks like a completed ABC correction. Kind of just trending up right here. But once again, if ETH breaks down, this is going to break down. Probably come back down to 74 cents. If ETH holds support, this probably holds support and then makes an attempt at a breakout of these range highs. That's what I think is going to be happening next. But this is just a wave 1 impulse. Wave 3 comes next, and it'll probably get pretty parabolic. Most of the alts are at all-time lows. It depends which alts. I mean, realistically, a lot of them are holding support. They were getting, I mean, guys, people weren't getting that much free money from the government. I mean, they really weren't. Businesses, yeah. Businesses got a lot of free money, but if you're counting a stimulus check, I mean, it's not really that much money. Everybody always says retail doesn't have money, but they will show up. I promise you. You're going to see it happen. Same ways they always do. There's enough people out there that got a few $100 and $1,000 to throw at the market, because it's all relative. You know, you might not have any money when the market's down, but when you see the market go up 10x in the course of a month or two, all of a sudden you pull money out of your ass and you start throwing it in the market. It's emotional. It always is the same. And everybody always says this time is different, and it never is. So I'm not playing that game. I've already been, this is my third cycle. I mean, shit. It's all the same every single time. The only difference is, you know, the time of like when the altcoins pump. Is it like earlier into year 4? Is it later into year 4? It's all the same. I mean, to be the one person saying this time is different, it never is. So, you know, I just don't believe, I don't subscribe to that belief personally, but we're going to see. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we don't have retail show up, but man, no retail in the institutional cycle. Why? Like, why? Is retail, I mean, is the institutions just here to buy the top or what? That doesn't really make any sense to me. Does Polygon have a chance to do all-time high? Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely. I mean, if ETH is going to make a new all-time high, Polygon's going to do the same thing. It's one of the bigger cryptos out there. For sure, that one will. I think that that's a likely thing. Do you believe the cycle will go into 2026? It easily can. It really can. I mean, here's the thing, guys. Let's jump into the 4-year cycles real quick. And let's go take a peek, because I'll just kind of like answer all these questions and stuff, because it can be explained very simply. So, and if you were wondering what my Bitcoin thoughts were, we're either going to hold support here, or we're going to make one more low. That's it. But for real, let's go to a weekly. Let's go to a log chart. What the heck? Okay, let's go to a log chart. And let's just take a peek at some of these 4-year cycles, because this is the one thing that can change in a 4-year cycle, guys, where the peak is. The one thing that stays the same in a 4-year cycle is where the peak low is. So if we go every peak low for our bear markets, let's see, gosh, come on. Right there. Every peak low is 4 years apart, right? We all know that. That's the one thing that we focus on in the 4-year cycle. From peak low to peak low, 1,428. From peak low to peak low, 1442. And if you draw it at the FTX collapse, it's exactly 1428 too. So whether you're drawing it 2 candles above or 1 candle before, it doesn't change anything. Capitulation was technically 1428. So both of the last 2 cycles, 4 years, 8 years, were exactly the same. Now, the question was, is this cycle different? Well, I mean, we bottomed exactly 4 years from the last cycle, which was exactly the same time frames that the last cycle bottomed before it. So is anything different with that? No. So move forward into this cycle. How do we play the current cycle, understanding that we started a new 4-year cycle? Well, if we take this same formula, let's just draw all the way into advance to 1,428 days. And let's just speculate that that's going to be the next bear market bottom. Technically, that's going to be October of 2026, which is kind of funny because December, November, it wouldn't surprise me if, I don't know what I'm trying to explain. I'm just thinking in my head. But anyways, let's keep going. Sometimes I get into a chart and I start thinking about stuff, and you know, it's not important. I was just trying to talking to myself out loud. But anyways, if we're looking at this, technically the next bear market low, if we're talking 1428, exactly the same time frames as the other cycles have been, you know, we're going to be looking at basically the beginning of October of 2026 as the bear market low. So that's where we're looking for another one of these collapses. But up to this point, all that's really happened is Bitcoin has just maintained this ascending support, right? We've never actually done this except for maybe 2017. And that's why I've always been real adamant about comparing this cycle to 2017, because I think that this is just vertical accumulation, right? We've had institutional adoption, MicroStrategy, you know, all of the BlackRock, Vanguard, these other institutional corporations and banks. They've been buying Bitcoin, and they're consistently buying Bitcoin. And we've seen all of this as the price is just going straight up and to the right in this very parabolic type of uptrend. It's not unsustainably parabolic. We haven't seen any crazy blow off top. It's just consistent, steady uptrending, which is exactly what you want to see. What I think happens is we do see a blow off top, right? When that happens, we don't know, but I think it's coming very soon. I mean, it kind of has to come very soon. But the one thing about a 4-year cycle is if we're looking at the tops, if we look from this cycle bottom all the way to here, it was 1,064 days from the bottom to the top. If we look over here, it was 1,064 days from the bottom to the top. So because all of our cycles have been exactly the same up to this point, from both peak low to peak low, as well as peak low to peak high, a lot of people are kind of still speculating that it's going to be the same. You know, we could come over, we could come over here and actually take a peek at what if we look at the all-time high to the all-time high, this one was almost 1,450 days. If we do it over here, all-time high to all-time high, this one was 1,428 days. So the tops are generally going to be the thing that shifts. It can be a little bit like a couple months difference. It could be, you know, the same time frames. We don't know. But that's one thing that is the shifting point, is where the cycle peaks at. You know, if we go from the bottom of this cycle and we go 1,400 or 12 or 1,064 days up, that is basically October 6th of 2025. That's where you'd be looking for the peak of this cycle. So, I mean, next month, based off of this, if you're going to analyze based off of the tops, technically our peak is like 3 weeks away, just under a month away. That's where the cycle top is projected to top. So, I mean, if you're going to be taking profits based off of the cycle tops, every one of the last two every one of the last two cycles for 8 years has followed 1,064 days from the peak low to the peak high, peak low to the peak high. So if we're going to follow that pattern, we're going to top in a month. Like, that's the top of the cycle. So, you know, is it going to drag out a little bit longer? In my opinion, it is, because we haven't seen a blow off top. So the problem is, the one variable that we don't know how it's going to change is where the top is, because that's the only thing that changes in a 4-year cycle. The thing that you always stay the same is peak low to peak low, peak low to peak low. That's how you trade a 4-year cycle, because the cycle starts at the peak low of the bear market, the very lowest low it makes, and then the bull market ends the next peak low at that bottom of the following bear market. And that's why you analyze peak low to peak low. And it's always 4 years. That's been the case every single cycle. The question is, how is the variance going to happen with the all-time high? Because up to this point, the cycles have perfectly followed the same sort of trend, where it's 1,064 days up, 3 years up, 1 year down, 3 years up, 1 year down. Well, how is this going to shift? Are we going to see maybe this one lasts a little bit longer, where if we go to the 1st of January or the end of December, that's 1,150 days. So technically that's a lot longer than these prior cycles have been. So if we're talking about that type of stuff, I think it's likely that this cycle is already starting to be a little bit different. And because of that, the cycle's already starting to tip into that 2026 territory, where we're going to most likely have this peak happen a little bit later into the cycle. But the only reason I maintain that is because we've just held such a consistent uptrend up to this point. You know, maybe the volatility is no longer here, where we don't see those peak bull markets where all the euphoria comes in and stuff. But I don't necessarily think that's the case. I do think we'll have some type of a blow off top, and it probably happens on this next impulse, right? And that's where we're probably going to see something along the lines of this, where it just really rockets up, and then that kind of sets us in for that next major decline all the way back down into our 4-year cycle low. And, you know, but keep in mind, guys, that that's a right translated cycle. So if we come over here, hold on, let me make sure I'm not getting too far ahead of myself. Make sure you guys are all still alive. I don't want to talk too much and have you guys have too many questions. Hit the damn like button. Amen, brother. Thank you, Funkmaster Hex. Do you anticipate institutional participation as a long-term negative, or is it all good? I mean, it's just part of the adoption. That's all you can say. I mean, it's a good thing if you want crypto to go up. I mean, we've all been buying these things with the anticipation that the institutions would come in. When the institutions came in, we knew the price would go up, and we knew that the institutions would have to have retail investors to have liquidity to sell into. So we've, in my opinion, we're with the institutions. We're about to see retail FOMO. But what's funny about this cycle is we actually are going to probably see institutional FOMO at the same time, right? Where everybody's trying to copy micro strategy with the Michael Saylor approach. They're already starting to do this with Ethereum, with the Bitmine immersion tech company. They're doing that same kind of formula. They're basically going to be micro strategy for Ethereum. We're seeing all of these things, and in my opinion, it's kind of a sign of institutional FOMO, right? So this cycle could peak a little bit deeper into 2026 for those reasons. It's the one variable that changes in the 4-year cycle. Now, here's the main thing you guys need to be aware of. When you're analyzing a 4-year cycle, where the cycle peaks from the mid-range. So what's half of 1,450? 725, I believe. So technically the halfway point of the cycle is right here. So we're going to make this one yellow. So peak low to peak low is 4 years. However, if we're looking over in this period at the mid-range point, basically what is known as a left or right translation of a 4-year cycle. So if the cycle peaks on the left side of the mid-range, right? So we have the mid-range, this is the left side of it. If the cycle peaks on the left side, it means that it's basically what that means is the following cycle is not going to follow the 4-year cycle, and you're probably going to have a bigger bear market where it's actually a bear market for a year, maybe 3 years where it like barely goes up and then it goes for another bear market, right? So it would be this long-term like consolidation pattern that would follow. But up to this point, every cycle has peaked on the right side of the mid-range point. So that's what's called a right translated cycle. And what a right translated cycle basically points to is that the following cycle is going to keep following the same 4-year trend, right? And that's been the case every single one of these cycles. So if we come back over in here, let's make this one red. And then we go 725 days into the 2017 cycle, you know, you're pretty much looking at the exact same thing right here, where the mid-range, where the mid-range is here. And where does the cycle peak at? Well, it peaked on the right side of the mid-range. So it was a right translated cycle. And then what happened after that? We did another 4-year right translated cycle. So now we're into this cycle. We know that 1,400, we're going to go 1,450 days because that's technically 4 years, not 1,428. 1,450 is technically 4 years. So our next bear market bottom would be like the end of October based off of the 1,450 method. If we follow the 1,428 day method, then it would be the beginning of October. But you're pretty much looking at October being 4 years from our last cycle low. Now, if that's the case, where are we going to be peaking on the mid-range? Well, where the heck is the, let's see here, 725 is going to be right here. So if we're drawing a mid-range point, we're already on the right side of this mid-range. So technically this is a right translated cycle. See how both peaks are outside of this range? We have followed what is called a right translated cycle. But the interesting thing about this following cycle, if we go into 2026, let's assume that this thing runs, we make this big push, right? And then we kind of peak like into like March of 2026, something like this, right? And then that's where our bear market starts. I mean, technically our bear market would be much shorter in duration. If we peaked in the beginning of March of 2026, our bear market is only going to be 238 days long. So if that's the case, if we end up peaking further into our time frames that are supposed to be where our bear market is happening, because our bear markets are a year long. Every one of our bear markets have been a year long. This one, 364 days. This one, 364 days, right? 2017 was a little longer. It was like 413 days. But 1 year down, 3 years up. 1 year down, 3 years up equals a full 4-year cycle. So if we're looking at this cycle and we end up running and we peak at like February, March of 2026, we're cutting into that 1 year portion of the bear market cycle. And we're going to be like, you know, a quarter of that cycle just gone because we peaked so late into the bull market. And if that's the case, what I do believe happens, you still bottom at the same 4-year time frames, that doesn't change. The peak is the thing that changes. But if we end up peaking later into 2026, we have a shortened bear market, what most likely happens is Bitcoin runs, and it might even just take 4 years where it's pretty much just slow grinding back up to these prior all-time highs. And then the peak of that 4-year cycle is either, you know, like not a new all-time high, and then it comes all the way back down to just retest this. And we basically have back-to-back 4-year cycles where it's kind of just doing this below those prior all-time highs. That's one of the options that can happen. Another option that can happen is where we actually have a left translated cycle, remember? Because if we're looking at a left translated cycle, if this is the bear market bottom, let's say 50K approximately, and that's 4 years from the last cycle low, 725 days is going to be giving us our mid-range point. So what happens in the following cycle, if we're looking and mapping this out over the course of another new bull market, you're pretty much looking at 1450 would be 2030 would be the next bear market low that you'd be projecting. But the mid-range point of the following cycle, because keep in mind, guys, even though the top changes, the bottoms are always going to stay the same. You're still, even in a left translated cycle, you're still targeting that same 4 years from the last bear market low. So nothing changes the way that you're buying into the 4-year cycle. The only thing that changes is how to play the following bull market, because the peaks are the thing that shifts, right? So every cycle we've had a right translated cycle where the mid-range point, we're peaking on the right side of that. Technically, this is a right translated cycle because we're on the right side of the mid-range. But if we run into 2026 and it's February, March of 2026, we're cutting into that 1-year threshold of the bear market. And what I think is another potential that could happen is where Bitcoin starts to run and it picks up steam really quickly. And it just really goes into this quick blow off top before it starts crashing and goes back down, right? And we're doing this on the left side of the mid-range point. And if that's the case, that would be our left translated cycle. And it would be the first time that that happens. And what would follow after is going to be like 2 4-year cycles of nothing, where it's just going sideways, down, and it's more or less just erasing all of the value that it made over the last 15 years, right? That is technically the way that this cycle would progress. That's the way the 4-year cycles work. The one thing that changes is where the peak is. And if we peak early into a 4-year cycle on the left side of the mid-range, it signals that the whole 4-year trend has shifted. This whole 15+ year trend that we've been on has changed. And then that's where you're going to see that flipping point. So this is a possibility that I'm watching for, but it really revolves around where we peak at. Either way, even if we peak at the end of the year, whether we peak at the beginning of 2026, we're still targeting 4 years from our last 4-year cycle bottom. So you'd be looking at like the end of October, start accumulating your Bitcoin, and you'd be buying back into Bitcoin. But you know, if this is going to be the case, then chances are, you know, we're very much at the very ending of these cycles, and it's not going to follow the same thing. The best chart that I can share with you guys that describes what I think happens for Bitcoin is actually the Dow Jones. Oops. Dow Jones. So if we look at the Dow, take it off log scale. Wait, it's not the Dow. What is it? Oh, it's the NASDAQ. My bad. If we look at the NASDAQ, this, in my opinion, is what happens to Bitcoin at the end of this. Well, not at the end of this cycle. If it does a left translated cycle. So this was the internet bubble right here. This was the peak of the internet bubble. The market sold off, right? It sold off from 2000 to 2002. Obviously, the time frames aren't going to be 4-year cycle. I'm not trying to draw a 4-year cycle into the NASDAQ because it doesn't work. However, we had this 2-year bear market. So if this was Bitcoin, we would have the 1-year bear market, right? And then it would go down. And then this entire slow grind back up would be a full 3-year uptrend. This would take 3 years to do, as it's not even going up to those all-time highs. It's not making a new all-time high. It's just slow grinding back up. And then what would happen is you'd have the end of the 3-year bull market right here, and it would start another 1-year bear market back down. This bear market could just come back down to retest support. It could make a new all-time low like that. But after that 1-year bear market, then you're going to do another 3-year thing, right? And it might take 8 years worth of consolidation before Bitcoin's finally back at that point where it's going to go back up in value. Because obviously the NASDAQ went back up in value. It just took a little while, right? But it took like a decade. You know, from where we broke all-time highs, I mean, geez, 5,500 days approximately. And think about how quick it went up. Obviously, it's different. We can't perfectly compare it with Bitcoin. But if we're looking at these cycles and we're following the 4-year cycles and we do a left translated cycle, we run deeper into 2026, chances are that following cycle is going to be left translated. And what happens after a left translated cycle is pretty much just the, you know, the sell-off, the resolution of all of this 10, 15, 20 year worth of price appreciation. That's where it all kind of settles down and everybody gets washed out. And then it's only the long-term investors that have been believing, the institutions that can afford to hold something down 85, 90% and keep holding it over the course of a decade. Those are going to be the ones that end up kind of, you know, being the big Bitcoin holders and being the big institutions of the following cycles. Because I do think we're getting close to the point where Bitcoin is no longer going to keep doing these cycles. I think that's very apparent. The question is when that shifts, because really none of us actually know. Yo, thank you for the subscribe. I appreciate that. What happened to your friend? Used to do joint live streams. Me and him I was just barely talking to him the other day about starting like doing the same thing. Even if we're not live streaming together, like working together, because me and him used to meet up every single day and post our videos. Because at the time I couldn't afford Wi-Fi. I lived at my grandma's house next door in their basement. So I was sitting over there and was just trying to make my YouTube videos. And because I lived so far away from town, I had terrible internet. And you'd click the button to upload your video and it would just say 2.5 hours and then some. Like it was like, okay, you have at least 2.5 hours of waiting before this uploads. And I'd be like, well, how am I supposed to hit peak upload? So I drive all the way to his house, upload off of his internet. And that was our routine every single day. We did that every single day for a few years. I was talking about, you know, us doing that same thing because as we're getting into this cycle, it's better to have two minds kind of focusing together and providing value to a community because then everybody profits and wins at the same time. I have followed you for the last 5 years because I acquired a huge bag of XRP. Thanks for always staying positive. Made me never panic sell. Hey, shout out to you. That's a great hold. One of the only ones that got institutionally adopted too. Would you take a 1% rate cut to cause a massive spike up before October? Would take a 1% rate cut. Who knows? That's all speculative. The market's pricing in the rate cut. That's what we're seeing. All of the betting markets are showing like 94%, I believe was the last odd that I saw for a rate cut at the end of this month. So if that's, or whenever, I think their meeting's like in a week or two from now. So when that happens, you know, you're going to see the market react. But here's the problem with these rate cuts, guys, is, they're just going to print more money, right? So yeah, the market's probably going to pump, but 4 years from now, we're going to have the same issues that we just had from the last 4 years ago where they printed all that money. They created 50% of the US dollar supply in a year. And now we've seen just what impact that has. So many people are struggling right now because of inflation and things are only getting more expensive. The price of beef, I went and saw a ribeye steak and it was like $25 a pound. It was choice. It wasn't even like anything worth the crap. So everything is getting really, really expensive. And if they cut rates, they're just going to print more money. And so 4 years from now, we're going to be, excuse me, stuck in the same exact situation where we have more inflation. Yay, my bag's pumped. But if you didn't sell, you're going to be screwed because you're going to lose out way more. So it's like a blessing and a curse. If that's what it takes to pump the bags, go, so be it. However, there's always going to be a few years from now the fallback on what all of this stupid stimulus does because, it's just silly. All they're doing is printing money. Trump isn't doing anything for the economy. Yes, tariffs in theory are a good idea, but they're never going to be like what the tariffs originally were used for. Back in the day, if the government wanted to loan money, they would issue bonds. And then it was up to the U.S. Citizens to go out and buy these bonds. And it was that way that they raised money to go out and build stuff and do things in the government. And then they had these tariffs. They used the tariff money from exporting goods and stuff. And then that was basically how we earned a profit and whatnot. And so when we did away with all of that, we've changed things so much that you can't just go back and start, charging tariffs. if we went back and started actually using tariffs in the same way that they were originally used for, I think it's a great idea. But the idea that Trump's going to do all of that in 4 years is just stupid, because he's not. His plan is to print more money, and we're just following like the 1920s all over again, where they realized, oh wow, we turn on this money printer and we inject more liquidity into the economy, everything goes up. And everything goes up, and it technically outperforms inflation. So, you know, even though things are getting more expensive, you're still actually making a little bit more. So it's kind of an illusion, right? It hides just how bad the debt really is. But then, you know, same thing, 1929, eventually that's all going to end. And what happens? Everything gets absolutely smoked. So we're just kind of repeating the same thing, cutting interest rates, printing more money, injecting more capital into our economy to drive up the stocks, get more people interested in trying to leverage more real estate and things. But all of this is coming to a close very soon, probably at the end of this decade. I don't see a scenario where we don't have a great big shakeout in real estate and the stock market. And Bitcoin's going to be smoked by that too. I don't see a scenario where it does well. Maybe it becomes the gold standard type thing, and it does, but I find it less likely. I think that we're due for a massive real estate sell-off. I'm not going to say a global collapse, but I think we're due for a massive real estate liquidation. And at the same time, the stock market's going to be in the same boat. So both of these things are coming probably by the end of the decade. So all of our money now should just be used for how we're going to actually accumulate that dip, because that's really where our long-term wealth is going to be made. That's how you become the 1%, is always by speculating and being ahead of that crash, because it's the way Warren Buffett made his money. Mike Maloney, he's a really big gold and silver guy. He's a really great person to watch videos on YouTube. He kind of maps these things out. But whenever you see the real estate market sell off and the stock market sell off, and you have all of this crazy inflation, it's always a good thing for gold and silver markets, right? They usually do really well. And we can see that, you know, if we come over, let's take a peek at this chart. So this is the NASDAQ, right? This shows the peak of the internet bubble and where it fell. If we pull up this chart side by side with gold, you'll see that gold ripped after the internet bubble when everything else collapsed. So the same thing is going to happen again, guys. I'm telling you right now, without a doubt, the same stuff is going to happen. This time is not different. We're repeating all the same history that's always happened. The only difference is our debt bubble's bigger than it's ever been. But same thing, gold had been through this big 30, 40-year corrective phase. And where is the exact bottom of this? 1999. Where is the exact top of this? 2000. Basically 1999. It was the beginning of 2000. And then what happens? We invade Iraq. We start running. And gold goes into its new cycle. And it ends up peaking in 2011. So what's funny is this thing kept going up right here, right? This started to bottom in 2002. So it was kind of going up with gold. Everybody had the illusion that it was going to go back up again. And then here's 2007. The NASDAQ drops. Gold breaks out, makes this lower high, and the NASDAQ drops again. And gold dropped inside of that secondary dip right here, but it was at the very bottom of this when the NASDAQ bottomed and started going up that gold ripped in 2008 all the way up here to 2011. So what you end up seeing is those periods of time where all of the speculative money comes in, because the NASDAQ is basically the speculation index. It's all of like the funny money in the market, right? All the equities, all of the risk on type of investments. So if we're seeing, we're at a very serious point that's comparable to what we saw in the internet bubble, right? The internet bubble, I mean, we're basically just in the crypto internet bubble all over again. And you see this thing just rocketing up here. We're for sure going to see a sell-off in this. And you're looking at gold breaking out of this massive cup and handle formation right here. And it's starting that new cycle, right? You're seeing that right here. I don't think that this is over by any means. And we're probably just going to see this thing keep climbing like crazy. But I think the real buy here is actually silver, even though it's going to break its all-time high, because silver has been in 1980, basically a 45-year cup and handle formation. Let's go to a bigger time frame. Let's go to a 6-month time frame. This is the biggest cup and handle formation I have ever seen in my whole entire life. And I am so confident that silver is going to break out and massively outperform the price of gold. It's going to be the greatest. I mean, all I'm saying is the same stuff silver bugs have been saying forever. Everybody that likes silver has been saying silver is better than gold, saying it's more rare, saying it's going to pump harder. And it never has. But when you look at the silver chart, that is literally the biggest cup and handle ever, a 45-year cup and handle formation. Cup and handle formations are known as being some of the most bullish chart patterns because they signal a blow off top on the other side. So we have a number of ways to make money. My plan is to take profit on my crypto. My plan is to buy gold and silver. My plan is to wait until we see the real estate collapse. We see the stock market collapse, because that's when gold and silver are really going to boom the most. And then we can take our profits on that and we can go back into the risk on investments, because that's when they start to bottom as well. So there's ways to play this, but I think for sure over the next 5 to 10 years, I think that you're better off being in gold, being in silver, being in precious metals, because we're just way too overvalued. There's too much debt in the system, and all of this stuff will for sure have a big liquidation event. The only thing that is proven to be the best thing that you can be in, oil is another good example of that. I believe that oil did. Let's go take a peek at oil over here. See how crude oil, this isn't even the right chart. Where do we find the right chart? Crude oil. I hate how hard it is to find these stupid things. I think it's this one. There we go. So this is crude oil. Where's 2000? Right here. Where did it peak? 2008. So you always see the energy sectors do well as well. So energy, well, that's war. I mean, that's why this did so well. We invaded Iraq. So, war is very, very bullish for all of those things when it comes to oil. When we're talking about uranium stocks and things like that, those are good speculations that I think are going to take off. So if we're talking about going into this period, man, let me see if I can find the chart. I don't know where to find it. If you guys wait just a minute and let me find this chart, it's going to be a really good one. You'll be happy that you were looking at it. Let's go peek at, how the hell, YouTube. I'm going to go pull this thing up and you guys are going to see what I'm talking about. Oh my gosh. Oh, here we go. Okay. Mike Maloney shared this chart. Oops. And I want to go pull it up for you guys. Trying to figure out which one it was. Okay, here it is. All right, let me share this. Get out of here. Oh, right here. Perfect. All right, let me share this tab, guys. Where is it? Oh. Okay, right here. This is the U.S. stock valuations when they've hit their peak all-time highs. This is a perfect chart that has mapped out all of our biggest sell-offs and basically where we're at in this current cycle. So this was the Great Depression, the peak of that bull market in 1929. You got this big washout, right? And then you see the same thing. Starts reverse, comes back up. Here's 1965. You see another one of those big washouts. Same thing, got overvalued. Now you have all the way up here, 1999. That was the NASDAQ chart we were just looking at in the internet bubble. That was when all the equities got way too overvalued. Everybody was speculating too much on the internet. And then we invaded Iraq, and war is really bad for that type of stuff as well. And then we see that pull back. And over the course, ever since 2008, 2009, 2010, we've been rallying, and we've made a new all-time high, even higher than the Great Depression was. And this is technically what all of this stuff means in here. But this is the S&P on the log scale, is this white line, right? And we can see every single one of these peaks. We're getting pretty much lines up perfectly with this. And so as we're getting this new high, this is perfectly showing where we're at. Like, there is no doubt in my mind, equities are overvalued. We're going to see a huge washout across the board. They're going to get completely smoked. And it's going to be the worst one of all time, because we're going to have real estate and the equity market selling off at the same time, similar to 2008. And it's going to be an amazing opportunity for anybody that has, money to be able to buy that dip. Simply put, I think the best thing for safe havens is gold and silver. I'm not going to try and be into Bitcoin too much, you know, because I think it's a little bit less safe as we're getting closer towards these, you know, these shifting points in our indexes. And I think that that's going to be the point where we're going to have a big washout. And if you have that opportunity to buy into that, it's going to be really profitable. But I think gold and silver are kind of the areas that I want to go into. And if you're talking about speculations of war and us going to war with other countries, then you're going to be wanting to jump into oil, uranium, things like that, right? So that's what I think is going to be the better scenario moving forward. And it's going to be really crazy. We have a lot of opportunity to make profit as well as lose our asses. So, you know, which one do you prefer? But for sure, I think that gold and silver are kind of the move moving forward from here. What are your thoughts on investing in PaxG? No, just buy gold. Why would you buy a crypto? It's basically the same rule as not your keys, not your coins. Why would you buy a crypto that's going to hold your gold for you when you could just go buy the gold and hold it yourself? I mean, that just doesn't make sense in my eyes. I definitely wouldn't be holding a gold crypto for that reason, basically. Sentiment is so bad. We have waited a year for rate cuts. Now we are about to get one channel are saying it's bad news. I mean, I didn't say rate cuts are bad news. I just said that rate cuts cause inflation, which it does. I mean, that's just a straightforward cause and effect, right? It's going to pump the market. That was the whole point. I just went into detail explaining why it's going to pump the market, but why it's bad because of inflation. So if you don't sell into that, you're just going to be worse off than you were, because now your buying power decreases over the course of the next 4-year trend. And you didn't even make any profit because you didn't sell, right? That's the point. But yeah, guys, this is pretty much all I need to explain. We're an hour and a half deep. I got to go hit up Blue Mountain. We're going to go grouse hunting again. It's a drought year, so there probably isn't anything up there, but I appreciate your guys' support. It's a good little stream. I hope you guys see my great perspective on what I'm planning on doing with my money. Obviously, everybody else can do whatever they want, but I really think that we're better off being in the precious metal sector, as all of these equities are getting way too overvalued. And for sure, crypto is part of that speculative trend, without a doubt. I mean, geez, meme coins, Trump launching meme coins. Are you not getting any bearish signals from any of this? Like, really? We are for sure at the top of the equity cycle. And that's why I think selling at the end of this bull market is so important, because we're in 2025, getting close to 2026. Realistically, like 2030 is going to be a big shifting point for our markets, in my opinion. I'm not going to say we're going to completely collapse, because I don't really think we will, but we're going to see a big washout. And I think it's going to kind of be similar to how all of these other ones were. Doesn't have to be the Great Depression. Could be 1965. Could be 1999. Could be its own thing. I don't know, but you're better off selling. I promise you that, because we're going to get smoked very soon. But with that being said, guys, I'll catch you in the next one. Make some videos next week. Thank you guys so much for the support. As always, peace out.